All right, morning, guys. I'm going to give it just a couple minutes, let people join in. Hi, Jean. Hi, Donna. Hi, Christian. All right, I hope you guys are having a nice morning so far. So the plan, unfortunately, I was planning on doing these lectures this past weekend, but because of the snow, we lost power all weekend, which was a boatload of fun, as I'm sure you can imagine. But this is cool now, so we can kind of catch up on the material that you guys covered last week. I think last week you guys covered the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, which is exciting because we're really close to the age of revolutions, which will be awesome to learn about. I'm really excited. I don't know about you guys. All right, I have a few people in the waiting room. Let me admit them. Okay. I think I have everybody in so far. Cool. All right, I think what I'm going to do instead of staring blindly at the screen, I think I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen and then just admit people as they enter. Oh, there's Donovan. Hey, Donovan. Nice to see your face as always. If any others want to show their beautiful faces, I would love that. But if not, if you're not comfortable, it's all good. No worries. Hi, Wei. See, I told you I'd get it right this time. Alex. You know what, Alex? If you do find a place to get the PS5 from, let me know. Hi, Donna. Yeah, those PS5s, man, they're very. I've been trying to like pre-order one for like the last 2 months, and I can't pre-order them anywhere, which is super frustrating because, well, my wife, she's an obsessive gamer, and she actually she just started playing Destiny 2, and she's like all up into it. I don't know if you guys are Destiny fans at all, but yeah. Ishan, you got one? Wow, Alex, be careful though, because Ishan's likely to like be like, "Hey, you pay me $1,000, bro. It's all yours." Careful when you buy from non-corporate places, because you never know, you might get upcharged. But then again, Ishan's too good. Ishan's too good a person to do that, so I highly doubt that would happen. Oh, Donna, you like Destiny too? That's awesome. Like, honestly, like I haven't been watching my wife play or anything. I just know she's been playing obsessively. And I'm like, dude, she was so tired yesterday. She fell asleep at 7:00 p.m. She's still asleep. I'm like, dude, chilling. Donovan, I like Spider-Man too. I do like Spider-Man, but do you like Tobey Maguire Spider-Man or do you like the new Spider-Man? I prefer the new Spider-Man. That's just me. See. You said, eh. Yeah, I feel that. Let's see. Do I have everyone in? Oh, let me admit Joseph. And then I think I'm safe to share my screen. I'm going to do that right now. Share. Boop. Optimize screen sharing. Share. Cool. All right. So, excuse me. The game plan for today is to go over the scientific revolution and also to go over the Enlightenment and ways that the Enlightenment idea spread. So we're going to go over all of that good stuff today. So feel free, if you have any questions, just let me know. I'll be more than happy to pause and to answer your questions. So please, like, I want to encourage you guys, like, don't be afraid to interrupt me. If you have questions, then we're good. I'll make sure I answer them. All right, here we go. So first of all, what the heck was the Enlightenment? When you think of the word enlightened, actually think back to the Buddha and think back to how Siddhartha Gautama actually sat, well, this is how the story goes, sat underneath a tree and experienced this overwhelming sense of being enlightened, of understanding where all suffering comes from, and suffering comes from that of desire. So when we originally think of the word enlightenment, we think of Siddhartha Gautama. Nevertheless, the term enlightenment that you guys learned about last week means something a little bit different in terms of like the 18th century. So just FYI, the Enlightenment was also known as the Age of Reason. Oh, Alexis, yes, absolutely. So after class, feel free to stay behind in Zoom and I'm more than happy to answer your questions. All right, so that's the Enlightenment. It was known as the Age of Reason, and the reason being is because we see this massive shift during this Age of Reason. We see a shift from predominantly religious thinking, and we see a shift towards secularism. And I'm going to put that word in the chat. Secularism is just a fancy way of saying worldly thought. So secularism is the opposite of religious dogmatism. In other words, secularism is the antithesis of religion. Nevertheless, that's not to say that none of the Enlightenment thinkers were religious. In fact, I'm going to put that in the chat. Oh, hi, Henry. We bow down. Henry, you know what? We're going to call you Henry the Ninth because you're too cool to call Henry the Eighth. Henry the Eighth was a douche. So we'll just leave it at that. Hi, Ethan. All right. So with that said, what I wanted to put in the chat was that secular thought, or how about the domination of secular thought did not, oh, hi, Wally, did not mean that Enlightenment thinkers were not religious. In fact, the Enlightenment, I'm going to put this in the chat too, blended both secular and religious ideas in order to advocate for the individual. So those ideas that I put in the chat, I would definitely put them in your notes. So that way you can remember that even though during the Enlightenment, there was a major shift towards secularism, but that doesn't mean that religious thought was completely eliminated. It just means that secular or worldly ideas came to dominate societies as opposed to religion, which, as we remember, based on like the 30 Years' War, religion used to be the centerfold of everything. And that's not to say even that today, like there are many people who are religious. Many of you, I'm sure, are very religious. And that's all rooted in 13th, 14th, and 15th century thought, and even before that. Nevertheless, I think we can all agree that secular thought definitely plays a major force in today's world politics. Why is that? It's because the Enlightenment happened a few hundred years ago. But nevertheless, let's take a look at some of the other things about the Enlightenment that we should know about. Oh, humanism is human thought and secularism is thinking. Well, secularism is worldly thinking. And actually, secularism, I'm going to put this in the chat, Nicole, and humanism go hand in hand. Because remember, humanism was rooted, or actually humanism originated during the Renaissance. The idea that the human being had incredible worth and that it was advocated to place the individual human being at the top of societal tradition. With that said, humanism also was a major component of Enlightenment thought, and secularism and humanism do go hand in hand. As thinking becomes more worldly, the individual is considered of utmost importance. So that's something important to keep in mind. All right, let's talk a little bit more about like what the Enlightenment was and what Enlightenment thinkers were called. So the Enlightenment took place, I'm going to put this in the chat, the Enlightenment took place predominantly during the 1700s or the 18th century, same thing. Enlightenment thinkers were called philosophes. Philosophe is the French word for philosopher. And these philosophes used logical reasoning. I'm going to put this in the chat. Philosophes used logical reasoning in order to advocate for the individual and to ensure that governments protect citizens. So philosophes were very much against religious dogmatism. Again, that's not to say that they were religious, but they did kind of reject old superstitious beliefs and religious beliefs that oppressed the individual. Instead, they encouraged religious practice, but in a way that championed the individual. Here, I'm going to put that in the chat too. So Enlightenment philosophes encouraged religious practice in so forth that it championed the worth of the individual. And feel free, like, copy, paste, like, I don't care if you copy and paste exactly what I put. Oh, Joseph, I think maybe log out of Zoom and then log back in. You know what, actually, just a quick check. If you guys can see my screen, can you put a happy face for me? It says I'm screen sharing, so I want to make sure everyone can see it. Okay, cool. So Joseph, it may be an issue with your computer. So log out of Zoom and then log right back in and I'll make sure I admit you right away. All right. Oh, it's the chat blocking it here. Let me shift it.
Yeah, it's like kind of blocked.
Mira, what's blocked? You mean the entire screen is blocked or just some of it?
The entire screen is just like there's a couple blocks covered.
That's really strange. Well, how about, oh, Nicole says it's good now. Mira, how about for you? Is it okay now?
I still see
You know what, Mira, maybe, I'm going to give you the same advice as Joseph. Maybe log out real fast and then log back in and I'll make sure I let you in and hopefully that fixes the issue. All right, so I moved the chat to the left, so hopefully you guys can see it now. Sorry, I usually am really good about moving these boxes when necessary, but sometimes I forget. Okay, cool. So, again, religious thought still existed during the 18th century, but inasmuch the effort by Enlightenment philosophers was to use religion in a way that it would champion individual thought and individual existence. I really want to make sure that that makes sense to everybody. If that makes sense to you, the fact that yes, we're moving towards like secular thought and logical thinking, rational thought, but that religion still played a major role in world societies. If you understand that, if you could put a happy face for me, that'd be great. If you need clarification, just put a quick question mark for me. All right, cool. I always want to make sure I'm explaining things like super thoroughly. Oh, okay. So I'm going to explain it one more time. So during the Enlightenment, religion became less influential and secularism, which is worldly thought, secularism became much more dominant. So we see a shift from religion being the center of everything to rational thought being the center of everything. But that's not to say that religious influence just disappeared. People in the world, particularly in Europe, were still incredibly religious at this time, but there was a shift in the thinking of religion. And I can probably guarantee, because of how amazing so many of you guys are, that even if you're religious, that the center of your religion is love and helping others and accepting others and helping people to become better versions of themselves. So religious thought and individualism are kind of intertwined now, and that's because of the Enlightenment. So I hope for those of you that had questions or that were a little bit confused, that it makes sense now, that during the Enlightenment, there was still religious influence. It's just that ideas about religion changed, that religion should serve the purpose of being a champion for the individual. So I hope that makes sense to all of you. If it does, we'll go ahead and move on. All right, sweet. You're very welcome. Again, if you guys ever have any questions, just throw them in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay. Ideas that originated during the Enlightenment. So all of these may look, oh, can I explain what humanism is? Yes. So humanism, I'm going to put this in the chat, was an intellectual movement that occurred during the Renaissance. The ideas that centered around humanism concerned individual worth. So the idea, oh, whoops, I accidentally sent that to someone privately. Hold on, let me send that to everybody. Sorry, Teresa. All right, so let me copy and paste that again. So humanism, an intellectual movement that occurred during the Renaissance. We have these ideas centered around the individual and individual worth. And yeah, Joseph, that's definitely a major component of humanism, is the idea that you should become, or not you, here, look at me using pronouns, that individuals should become the best possible versions of themselves by becoming, or by learning as many new skills and trades as possible. During the Renaissance, this would deem you as a Renaissance man. During the Enlightenment, that would deem you a philosopher. Oh, I completely spelled that wrong. Sorry. I think I fixed it. There we go. So Enlightenment thinkers during the 18th century were very similar to advocates of humanism during the Renaissance. So we can definitely assert that the Renaissance and the Enlightenment shared many characteristics, but the number one characteristic they shared was the advocation for individual worth. I definitely could have said that a little bit more cohesively, a little more smoothly, but I hope it makes sense to all of you that Renaissance thought about humanism very, very similar to Enlightenment thinking. Now, some of the ideas, some of the ideologies that originated during the Enlightenment is, well, actually all of these, and many of these ideas can be found in our own Declaration of Independence and in our Bill of Rights in our Constitution. So the right to happiness, the idea that church and state should be separate entities, your individual right to privacy, freedom of speech, freedom of petition, freedom of the press, prison reforms, the outlawing of cruel and unusual punishment, all of these ideas that we hold true in democratic nations in the 21st century are all ideas that originated not just during the Enlightenment, but during the Renaissance too. But for all intents and purposes of this lecture, we'll say they were rooted in the Enlightenment. That way we can kind of keep those ideas parallel. Okay, before I skip to the next slide, are there any questions so far? Or if you're feeling good, just put a happy face. All right, coolness. Can I explain the difference between the Petition of Right in the American Bill of Rights and the English Bill of Rights? The main difference between the Petition of Right from the American Bill of Rights and the English Bill of Rights is that it is essentially the design of the English government versus the design of the American government. The English government is designed so that the monarchy is essentially the figurehead of English politics, whereas within English politics, Parliament is the centerfold of lawmaking and the enforcing and execution of all of those political ideas, versus the United States. We have three clear branches of government. We have our executive, our legislative, and our judicial branch. And when it comes to the petition of rights in the American Bill of Rights, it's very much controlled by Congress, versus in the English Bill of Rights, the monarch has more control over that. So there are some clear differences between the English government and between the American government. Nevertheless, both governments are very much modeled on the ideas that can be found in Enlightenment ideology. And good job, Joseph. That's excellent. That you're right, that English government is a constitutional monarchy, where yes, you have the monarch as your figureheads, but then you have Parliament, who is pretty much wholly responsible for English lawmaking. All right, I want to make sure, does everyone have a thorough understanding of this slide so far? Like, are we good? I want to make sure that we're good to move on. We're chilling? Sweet. Okay, all right, let's skip ahead. So let's talk about the historical events that served as catalysts. Oh, let's see, I want to make sure. 335833. Who are you? Because I don't want to call you by a number. That seems a little cold. I just want to know. Oh, Simra. Hi, Simra. I just want to make sure that I'm explaining the the slide that you need explained. Is it this slide that we're on right now, or is it the one that we were just on?
It was the previous one.
The previous slide. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Let me go back here. So this slide pretty much just covers the overall ideas that came from the Enlightenment. And again, the Enlightenment here, I'm going to define Enlightenment for you guys. The Enlightenment was an intellectual movement that planted the seeds for political revolutions in the 19th or the 18th and 19th centuries, such as the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and oh, I almost forgot one, the Haitian Revolution, and the Latin American revolutions. So Simra, all of these ideas that you see here on this slide can be found in books, in letters, and documents that Enlightenment philosophers wrote in the 17th and 18th centuries. So ideas like freedom of speech, separation of church and state, prison reforms, arguments against discrimination, these are all ideas that can be found in our Declaration of Independence and in our Constitution. So it can be said that the Enlightenment was highly influential in the forming of modern governments because of all of these ideas that were shared in Enlightenment texts. Yeah, Donovan, that's actually a much nicer, easier way to put it. They started getting woke. That's very true. Simra, does that answer your question? I want to make sure we're good before we move on.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely, no problem. Okay, let me change the slide again here. There's got to be an easier way to do this. You know what I need? I need like triple monitors the way I have at school. Unfortunately, I don't have them at home. New achievement woke. Yes, I love all of your guys' historical jokes. You know, we need to have a meme competition. That's what we need to do. We need to have historical meme competitions. That's the next plan. All right. So let's talk about the historical events that led to the Enlightenment. So again, the Enlightenment was not like, it was not an event in and of itself. It was an intellectual movement. So what historical events led to that intellectual movement? Well, one of them was the 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War, I forgot to put the dates in the slide. I'm sorry about that. The 30 Years' War lasted from 1618 to 1648. And so many people were murdered in this war. And it was the last major war of religion before the 21st century, of course, which even then we've had wars rooted in religion, but not entirely in religion. The 30 Years' War was the last political conflict that was rooted in religion. So the 30 Years' War was a major cause or catalyst that started the Enlightenment. A Romeo and Juliet competition. I love it. You know what? I may let you include those because, you know, Shakespeare is part of AP World. So there you go. It's kind of omnipresent. Another major catalyst or cause that led to the Enlightenment was when Louis XIV, or the Sun King of France, remember, he was the absolute monarch of France, he revoked something that was called the Edict of Nantes. I'm going to put this in the chat. The Edict of Nantes granted religious toleration to not all religions, to all Christian faiths in France. But Louis XIV revoked it. So when Louis XIV revoked the Edict of Nantes, it didn't threaten Catholics. It threatened Protestant Protestant citizens in France. Nicole, the reason why Louis XIV revoked the Edict of Nantes, I'm going to put this in the chat, is because Louis XIV, one, he wanted to flex. He wanted to make Catholicism the national French religion. Because remember, Louis XIV was an absolutist. He wanted absolute power. He didn't want anybody to question him. But if you have citizens of your country following all kinds of different faiths, that makes your country a bit more cosmopolitan. It makes it more diverse. In other words, it makes your country harder to exact control over. And Louis XIV wanted total and complete dominion over the French nation of which he ruled. So with that said, that is why he revoked the Edict of Nantes. And when he did that, it caused over 200,000 practicing Protestants to flee from France. And many of them fled westward. Nevertheless, it really demonstrates how religious domination was very much a centerfold of pre-Enlightenment thought. Nevertheless, it's also really important to consider that the fact that Louis XIV revoked this Edict of Nantes to get absolute power, it very much becomes obvious of why this became a catalyst for the Enlightenment. Yeah, he wanted to take over France. And many Enlightenment philosophers were extremely fearful. Here, I'm going to put this in the chat. I'm going to put most Enlightenment philosophers were extremely fearful of tyranny, and I'm going to put tyranny, absolute monarchs, or other dictatorship style governments. They're very afraid of those types of things. And when you have this guy who's like, loony Louie, I love it. You know what, Nicole? I would say this was actually, I know I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I would say that Louis XIV was actually an extremely effective ruler. During his regime, he was able to essentially unify France. He was able to create some of the most unprecedented architectural monuments in the entire world. He led France to become one of the most powerful nations on the European continent. But with that said, that does not mean that in terms of today's ideology that he was incompetent. In fact, I think if historians were to look back upon his rule, then they would make the determination that while he was effective, Louis XIV did not act in a way that he advocated for the citizens of his country. So, Nicole, I think you can argue either way. I think you can argue that he was a good ruler, and I think you can argue that he was a bad ruler. It just depends on the context of where you're arguing from. Was he a bad ruler in terms of the time he ruled, or was he a bad ruler in 21st century terms? So it's really up to you to make that decision, but you just have to back up the argument. In fact, you may even get a prompt like that on the AP exam. Unlikely, but you might, because the AP exam is sort of kind of random in every way possible. All right, so let's go ahead and skip to the next slide here. All right, other causes of the Enlightenment. So we said that one cause, I'm going to list these in the chat. One cause of the Enlightenment was the 30 Years' War. Another cause of the Enlightenment was Louis the 14th, Louis the 14th revoking the Edict of Nantes. And another cause of the Enlightenment was pre-Enlightenment thinkers such as René Descartes. René Descartes is considered to be the foundational thinker that advocated for modern rationalism. In other words, not using religion to support your ideas, but using science to back up your ideas. Some of you may have heard of the phrase, "I think, therefore I am." That came from René Descartes. René Descartes was not so much an Enlightenment thinker because he existed before the Enlightenment, but his ideas about rationalism and his ideas about scientific thinking were heavily foundational for future Enlightenment thinkers. Yes, Bacon. I love Sir Francis Bacon. He is great. In fact, Sir Francis Bacon was the originator of what is now known as the scientific method, which many of you used for your science fair projects in the past. By the way, I'm curious, are any of your science teachers requiring you guys to do science fair projects this year? I doubt it, but I'm wondering. No? Okay, good. I bet you guys are all super relieved about that, huh? I bet you are. Yeah, I know I would be if I were you guys. I wouldn't want to do a science fair project this year. You know what? I actually really like science. I love it. I think it's so interesting, but I'm super bad at it. I'm really bad at science. It's not my thing. When it comes to like especially chemistry, I suck at chemistry. Donovan, you're going to have to tutor me with chem, okay? Because I suck at it and I want to learn more about it. But anyway, with that said, the scientific Francis Bacon, you guys can blame him for the science fair project that you have to do year after year because it's rooted in the scientific method. Joseph, you want to be an astrophysicist? That is awesome. Someday when you're a millionaire and I'm old and I'm still paying my student loans, maybe you could pay them off for me. Sorry, I kid. Nicole, you cried because of chem. You know what? I remember those days. I remember in high school, I cried because of chem a lot. I ended up, I think I scraped by with an A, but I don't think I earned it. I think I just did a lot of extra credit. But yeah, chemistry, it definitely bamboozled me. But in high school, my main subject was history. And I'm sure you guys are shocked by that, like shocked beyond degree. Henry, you want to be a dog when you grow up? I kind of do too, only if dogs had longer lifespans, but that's just me. But anywho, another originator of scientific thought in terms of rational thinking was Sir Isaac Newton. Now, Francis Bacon and Sir Isaac Newton were both part of another intellectual movement called the Scientific Revolution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you guys just to pause your chat for just a quick second here. And yes, Joseph, you're absolutely right. He actually was the inventor of calculus and he was a maniac. But what I want to do is I want to put the major intellectual movements we've learned about so far in chronological order in the chat for you. So here we go. It started with the Renaissance. The Renaissance was the first intellectual movement that advocated for rational thinking. The second intellectual movement that advocated for rational thought was the Scientific Revolution. And then, of course, the third intellectual movement that advocated for rational thought was the Enlightenment. And they all happened in that order. So it might make you think, well, why are we learning about the Enlightenment first then? Well, it's because the scientific revolution served as a major catalyst, a major cause for the Enlightenment. And it was scientific thought that Enlightenment thinking was based upon. So it's really important to kind of consider it in those terms and to understand it in those terms. But again, these are all of the major intellectual movements we've learned about in AP World so far: the Renaissance, scientific revolution, and the Enlightenment. All right, so let's take a look a little bit more.
Miss Bolton?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so basically the scientific revolution was like when people just use science to for their thinking, right?
Yes, so the scientific revolution served as a major shift in not just academic thought, but also religious thought. And you might also be wondering, well, what started the scientific revolution? Well, I'm going to give you the name of the person who essentially started, old people, who essentially started this intellectual movement: Nicholas Copernicus. So Nicholas Copernicus is, I almost said charged. Oh, the slides are blurry. Mira, are the slides blurry for anyone else? We okay? I just want to make sure. I want to, if it's blurry, oh, yours is good. Okay, Mira, I'm so sorry to ask you to do this, but maybe just log out real fast and log right back in. Hopefully that'll fix it. Fingers crossed. Now, Nicholas Copernicus, he was responsible for creating what is known as the heliocentric model of the universe. Heliocentric means sun-centered. I'm going to put that in the chat. Heliocentric model means sun-centered universe. Now, prior to the scientific revolution, I'm going to put this in the chat too. Before the scientific revolution, the universal model was considered to be geocentric. What does geocentric mean? I'm going to give 2 points of extra credit for the first person who gets it. Geocentric. Center of wrath. Earth. Good job, Manor. Yep, Manor got it. Good job. So Earth Center. Actually, I'm going to give it, hold on, let me get my phone. I'm going to give it to Manor. I'm going to give it to Nicole and Donna because they got it all at the same time. They like basically all typed it. Let me get that. Here we go. Cool. Good job. So yes, the geocentric model stated that the Earth was the center of the universe. But when Nicholas Copernicus asserted that the sun was the center of the universe, this transformed scientific thought. And it also created a lot of contention with the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church, part of its power was rooted in its scientific beliefs that the universe is Earth-centered. So not only did this transform the understanding of the universe, it also opened a door. When Copernicus introduced his heliocentric theory, this opened the door to rational thinking about all kinds of stuff. And yes, Donovan, you're absolutely right. The priests were like, wrong, not cool. Hold on. Actually, oh man, I don't want to waste time by switching screens, but you guys like The Office, right? I love The Office. It's my favorite show of all time. Are you guys fans? Sweet. Remember Gabe? Shut up about the sun. Shut up about the sun. That's the Catholic Church when it came to when it came to the heliocentric model. They're like, shut up about the sun. If you've never watched The Office, Nicole, I'm going to give you a homework assignment. Watch The Office. Watch it from beginning to end before it. Guys, they're taking it off Netflix. What is Netflix doing? Netflix is going to lose more than half of its viewership when they get rid of The Office. So dumb. I don't know about you guys, but on my Amazon wish list for Christmas, I put the entire Office series because, well, If it's not going to be on Netflix. Oh, Pam or Karen, that's the age-old debate. I think they're both wonderful in their own ways. I personally love Pam, but Karen was so sweet too. But for those of you who have not seen The Office, don't put spoilers in, because I want, especially for Nicole, I want Nicole to be able to experience the magic of The Office spoiler free. But anyway, yes, Jim is my spirit animal too. I love the Jim v. Dwight pranks. In fact, you know what? I'll tell you what. At the end of this lecture, if you guys want, I will put that on YouTube. We will watch all of the Jim and Dwight pranks because they are worth it. It's what makes life worth living, at least in my opinion. All right. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about Sir Francis Bacon's scientific method. So many of you, I'm sure, Asian Jim, yes, Asian Jim was great. But the scientific method specifically, I'm sure you guys know the whole order of it. You state your problem, you gather your information that helps you lead to your hypothesis, your educated guess, and then you perform your experiment, you analyze your data, gather your results, and then you come to a conclusion. But the scientific method was revolutionary in its time because it offered an avenue for scientists and also everyday people to come to conclusions in a rational way, to come to conclusions via deductive reasoning. So that's something to make sure that you are well versed in the scientific revolution. Like basically the stuff that I'm giving you right now is what you need to know about the scientific revolution. Yeah, exactly, Joseph, that's a nice way of putting it. The scientific method gives you a nice roadmap, a nice sort of clean, concise avenue to arrive at a conclusion rationally. Infecting, oh my God. Ethan, I can't even. You guys, y'all are too much. You're too much. All right. So let's talk about Sir Isaac Newton, who was also an originator of rational thought. By the way, I want to make sure that we're clear right now. The guys that we're talking about do not belong, they're not Enlightenment philosophers. They are scientists that came from the scientific revolution. But we're going over them because their ideas served as a foundation for later Enlightenment thinkers to kind of like base their ideas upon. But yes, French scientists, there actually were some English scientists too. There were tons, but the scientists we're going over today are the main ones that you need to know. You don't need to know every single one from the scientific revolution. But anywho, so Isaac Newton is most famous for developing his laws of motion, which I'm sure many of you have already learned about right now, or up to now. But if you haven't, Newton's first law of motion is that an object in motion will remain in motion until it meets opposition. So hold on, I need a cat to demonstrate. Give me 1 second.
No, she's gone.
Okay, I'm here. All right. So an object in motion stays in motion. So if I want to dance with my cat and move him like a pendulum, just like this, then he's going to stay in motion until something makes him stop. What's going to make him stop? Well, Bolton's tired. Ooh, gravity. Just curious, how pissed off does he look?
Yes.
Okay, maybe I should let him go. Let me see. I love you. Did you see that? Did you guys see how he cringed? Like, thanks, buddy. Makes me feel so loved. All right, so an object in motion stays in motion until it meets opposition from an opposing force. The second law of motion is I'm not really sure how to create a visual for this one, but the idea that force equals mass times acceleration. So maybe think of, I know it's a terrible thing to think of, but think of like a car accident. Like the faster your car is going and the bigger your car is, the more force you're going to come into contact with either another car or a wall or whatever it is. By the way, I know a lot of you are learning how to drive. Please don't get into car accidents. Please do not snap and drive, and don't text and drive. It's not worth it. It can wait. But yes, force equals mass times acceleration. That came from Isaac Newton. Yes, the more mass and speed equals more force. Good job. Yeah, it kind of is. And a lot of, at least I would actually argue that a lot of football plays are rooted in that second law of motion. Yeah, absolutely. The faster you move, the harder you hit. And that's also why certain football players are required to be like larger in stature, like taller and more muscular, that kind of thing. All right. And then, of course, the third law of motion. This is the main one, by the way. Actually, here, I'm going to put this here. The primary law of motion from Isaac Newton that was later applied to Enlightenment thought was the third law of motion. And that third law of motion states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So what that means is that if your government is screwing over its people in every aspect, in every avenue possible, then what's going to happen? There's going to be an opposite reaction. And that opposite reaction in the 18th and 19th centuries was political revolutions. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? That this third law of motion can very much be applied to the political revolutions that took place in the 18th and actually like 17, 18, and very early 1900s. Does that make sense to everybody? How this third law of motion can actually be applied to society and to history? Yeah, kind of like Harry and Voldemort's wands. Lana, that's a great observation. I like that. That made me happy. Oh, Nicole, did you have a question? Did you want more clarification on the third law of motion? Okay, so the third law of motion means that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So let me ask you guys, actually, Nicole, I'm gonna stick with you. Nicole, I don't want to say you because I don't want you to take it personally or anything like that, but what would happen if a high school student were to cheat on a test and then get caught? Nicole, only Nicole's answering, guys. So Nicole, if a high school student was to cheat on a test and get caught, what would happen? Yeah, they totally get marked off. They get a 0. Actually, this is actually a good time for a story time. So when I taught, Joseph, you wanted to answer? You know what, Joseph, go ahead. What was your answer? I'm interested to see what Joseph's going to say here. Immediate F for sure. So a few years ago, I taught AP World when I worked at Pomona High School. And in Pomona, things were definitely like different, the way things kind of worked as far as like education goes, that kind of thing. But my kids out there, they were awesome. I loved my kids out there, but I had one, I'm not going to say her name, but I had one who somehow, I still don't know how, but she got the answers to one of my tests. And this was like the hardest test of the year. She got the answers to it and she distributed the answers in a group chat to 20 other people in my, I don't know what, something just fell in my other room, but I'm not going to worry about it. But anyway, yeah, she distributed all those answers to like 20 other people and it was bad. Like I had 20 people who, bless their hearts, they worked really hard, but they weren't the best students in the class. All of a sudden, getting 100% on the hardest test of the year, I was like, nah, I don't know how she got it, but I was a little impressed at the astuteness of which she got them, but I was also very disappointed in her. But anywho, it's kind of like, I don't know, if you cheat on a test, that's bad, right? But most people, they cheat on tests because they're nervous or they don't want to like get in trouble from their parents if they get a bad grade. So I understand why most students cheat because I was there too. Like I didn't cheat in high school or anything, but I was definitely tempted because of all of that. But there's a big difference between a student who willingly cheats on a test and then somebody who distributes answers to multiple to more than a dozen people, that's bad. Like, you don't ever do that, because that's just distributing lies, and it's not cool. Like, distribution of answers just is not cool. So what I did is I went to my boss, I went to my administrator, and I had that one student expelled from AP. She was not allowed to take any other AP classes at that school. And that's because it was a major violation of academic ethics. And like I said, there's a big difference between cheating and then distribution of the opportunity to cheat. There's a huge difference there. Also, with that said, that same student, had she done it at the college level, has she distributed answers like that, that's grounds for expulsion from the college level. And then think about like how much money you would end up losing. Because like, if you have 2 years of college and then you do that your junior year of college and then you screw yourself over, it's just not worth it. So do your best to stay away from that temptation. Again, I understand it, but do your best to stay away from it, because I would hate for that to happen to any of you. But the reason why I'm telling that story really isn't to, like, you know, crap on you guys. It's really more to illustrate the third law of motion here. For every action, there is a consequence, and they're equal. Well, hopefully they're equal. They should mirror one another. So Nicole, I hope that illustrates for you what the third law of motion means. And I really hope none of you took that personally or anything like that. It was not meant to be an attack. It was literally just meant to be illustrative of that third law of motion. But it made for a good story too. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Yeah, see, Bolton's cool. Bolton's nice, but don't cheat. Cheating ain't cool. All right. So back to the Enlightenment. So I'm not going to go over every single little point on each of these slides. There's kind of a lot. This is actually a PowerPoint that I made a few years ago, and I just didn't have time to like streamline it. But the main points that I would pay attention to here is these last 2 points. These last 2 points. Yes, actually, I need to upload a few PowerPoints to Google Classroom. So when I do upload stuff, I'm going to upload a few. I'm going to upload the one for absolutism. I'm going to upload this one. And then there's a couple more. I forget which ones I need to, but I'll upload a bunch. Anywho, from this slide, I would just kind of focus on these last 2 points. So Paris was actually considered to be the hotbed of the Enlightenment. In other words, it was where Enlightenment ideas would spread most predominantly. It's kind of ironic, though, that Paris was the epicenter for Enlightenment thought, because in Paris, France, it was the center of absolutist leaders like Louis XIV. Nevertheless, Enlightenment philosophers that lived under Louis XIV's regime, they were very much against his ideologies. They were very much against his leadership style. So I guess it's not so ironic that France did become like the center of everything Enlightenment related. Also, the most important point on this slide, this can be applied to any like impact statement in your thesis, that the Enlightenment led directly to the American Revolution first, followed by the French Revolution. So this is probably the most important point on this slide. These last two are the most important. Let's see, I need to bold and underline this guy. Do you guys want me to put that in the chat? So you can, here, I'm going to put it in the chat so you can copy and paste it. Okay, Control C, Control V. Boop. Okay, coolness. Viva la revolution. Yes, Donovan. Oh my gosh, I cannot wait to go over the French Revolution with you guys. Like, we're going to have like a 3-hour Zoom session just to talk about all of it. And then we need to watch Les Mis. There's a lot of things that need to happen in the next few weeks. All right. If you guys are good, like if you're feeling good about the material so far and you have no questions, put a smiley face for me. Sweet. All right. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this lecture, but it is like one of the most important lectures that we'll go over this year. In fact, I would say at least a 50% likelihood that the Enlightenment is going to show up on the AP World exam in some kind of fashion. So make sure you know it's super important. Okay, so the influence of the Enlightenment was primarily on governmental theories. And the primary Enlightenment philosophers that contributed to ideas about how government should be transformed, the three main guys were John Locke, Voltaire, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. John Locke was from England. Voltaire and Rousseau were both from France. And these are the three Enlightenment philosophers that contributed most greatly to political change in world history. Yes, I can definitely put that in the chat. So John Locke, Voltaire, well, misspelled that, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau were the primary Enlightenment philosophers that contributed to political change across the world and most famously inspired the American and French, why is my thing, oh, here we go, and French revolutions. There you go. I would definitely copy and paste that and put it to your notes. Okie dokie. Let's switch slides here. Okay, so let's talk about John Locke for a minute. John Locke, he's kind of he's definitely the advocate for the individual. John Locke, I'm going to put this in the chat. John Locke advocated for the individual and argued that all people in their state of nature are born good. State of nature means that you are born as a clean slate. Like when you are born, you are a clean slate, and every person, according to John Locke, in their state of nature is born good. And because all people in their state of nature are born good, all people have the right to voice their political, I can't spell today, opinions in elections. You put it that way. So that was John Locke's theory. John Locke also believed that all people are born with something called natural rights. These natural rights are life, liberty, and property. What does that sound like? Life, liberty, and fill in the blank. Yeah. Nicole, I'm going to give you 3 points for that. Hold on. Where's my phone? I use my phone so little. Here we go. Good job. Yes, in the pursuit of happiness, which came from the Declaration of Independence. So yeah, John Locke was highly foundational when it comes to modern political theory. And in fact, the words that he wrote, actually here, I'm going to give you the name of his most famous book. John Locke's most famous book was the Two Treatises of Government. In this book, he talked about natural rights, and he also talked about something called the social contract. We're going to come back to this idea of the social contract here in just a second, but it is extremely important. Please don't let me forget to explain that because it's like the centerfold of everything we're learning about today. Okay, Jean-Jacques Rousseau was another famous Enlightenment philosopher. And in his documents, he talks about how everybody, all people are born, here I'm going to put Rousseau, all people in their state of nature are born good with the ability to turn bad. So with that said, Rousseau's argument is that government should serve to protect all citizens in order to prevent rebellion and insurrection. So their ideas were more or less the same, but a little bit different in how they were carried out. And we're going to talk a bit more about what that means here in just a second. And yeah, definitely the basis of Lord of the Flies. You know, I always liked the Lord of the Flies story. I feel like the kids in Lord of the Flies would like break desks for firewood. I feel like that's like a thing they would do. All right, here we go. Here's Jean Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Personally, I think Rousseau was a better looking guy, but you know, Jean Locke, he was a good guy too. And Jean Locke looks a little bit more snazzy in his outfit, but they're both handsome men. I like Rousseau's eyes. I don't know, I'm just weird. Okay. The social contract. This is extremely important. The social contract, I'm going to put this in the chat. The social contract was advocated for by both Locke and Rousseau. They both advocated for it. Now the idea, actually here, let's talk about teachers for a second. We've all had bad teachers. All of us have had bad teachers, and every teacher isn't always great. Like all teachers have ways that they need to learn. But have any of you ever had a teacher that was so bad that they made you want to just completely give up on school? Bad as in they couldn't teach, and bad as in they debilitated you and said that you couldn't learn, or horrible things like that. Okay, so we've all kind of had teachers like that. I had a teacher like that. I won't say who, but you know, we've all been there. But the idea is that teachers give out their syllabi at the beginning. Who publicly humiliated you, Donovan? I'll go get her. I will get her. Well, you don't have to say her name, but I'll just like imagine it in my head. There, I just, Donovan, I just annihilated your first grade teacher in my head, in my imagination. It just happened. I won't say how it happened, but it happened. And Joseph, I'm glad that your mom went off on that teacher too. Like, we all need people to advocate for us when we have teachers who don't serve us in the way that they're supposed to. Yes, all teachers could be better. I could be better. Like, I really struggle with like keeping up with everything, especially this year, because I have like 200 AP students, which I've never had before. But at the end of the day, when a teacher is inherently bad and thinks you are stupid, says you're not going to go anywhere, doesn't do anything to help you, doesn't do anything to teach you, that is a bad teacher. And those teachers were supposed to create social contracts with their kids. Teachers are supposed to be there for their students, and in return, you as students are supposed to do your work for your teacher. That is the social contract that we carry with each other. Now, social contract when it comes to government, we know that the idea is that governments must respond to the needs of men. Men form governments, and governments must protect their people. They must protect their people. And if a government does not do that, then, and by the way, this is argued by both John Locke and Rousseau, if the government does not do what it needs to do to protect its citizens, then its citizens have the right to, in a mild situation, change the government, and in an extreme situation, to overthrow said government. So when you have the 13 original colonies in the United States who feel that their natural rights are being trampled on, and then they read the two treatises of government by John Locke, will that inspire the American Revolution? As a matter of fact, it did. So I'm going to put this in the chat. The social contract theory advocated by both Locke and Rousseau led directly to the outbreak of revolution at Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts. Boop. There you go. Copy and paste that, puppy. let's continue. Actually, before I continue, I really want to make sure, does everybody have a thorough understanding of what social contract means in terms of politics? If you do, put a happy face. If you'd like more explanation, then put a sad face or a question mark. Okay, looks like we're all good. Sweet. Okay, we're almost done here. Almost done. All right, views on the social contract. Actually, we can skip that one. Okay, let's talk about Voltaire. Another nice looking French fella here. But guys, I don't know about all these wigs. These wigs, they're kind of tripping me out. Oh, Henry, did you want more explanation on the social contract? I want to make sure before I move on, because I want to make sure that you have to understand that for sure. Yeah, Voltaire with the hair. All right, you know what? It's worth it to explain it one more time. Okay, cool. So the social contract is the theory that governments are obligated. Here, I'm going to post it. I'm going to put it in the chat. Governments are obligated to protect the natural rights of all citizens. When a government fails to protect the natural rights of all citizens, said citizens have the right to either modify or overthrow the government. So whenever a government tramples on people's ability to live freely, to own property, or to be free, and to be free from slavery, all of those things, then citizens themselves have the right to overthrow that government. So Henry, I would definitely copy and paste this as the definition for social contract. Where's that little up arrow guy? There we go. There we go. Yeah, government failure equals rebellion. And you know, we've seen that time and time again. And it's not something that is restricted to the 18th century. It's something that still very much happens now. I mean, no matter what your politics are, no matter who you vote for president, no matter what, governments are always corrupt to an extent. So that begs the question, how corrupt does the government need to get in order for people to have the right to rebel? And that's kind of a more of an existential or philosophical question. I really don't have a clear-cut answer to that, but it's something to think about. Let's see. If any of you are curious about the wigs that were worn at the time, they were meant to demonstrate the highest level of aristocracy. So if you were wealthy, then you're probably going to have a big, giant, white, curly wig. I don't know why that represented wealth at the time, but it did. Fashion's just a weird thing. Fashion's super weird. If you look back from 80s fashion, especially the 80s, people were tripping. Thankfully, I was born in 89, so I don't belong to that. All right, Nicole, aristocracy and nobility are essentially the same thing, but there is a clear difference. The nobility are wealthy people. Here, I'm going to put this in the chat. Nobility are, oh, hold on, let me put it to everybody. Whoop. Nobility born into wealth. Aristocracy, you are essentially, you grow into your wealth. That's kind of a bad way of putting it, but essentially your wealth is earned. You gain your position in society if you're a member of the aristocracy. But if you're part of the nobility, you're automatically a member of the aristocracy. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah, exactly. Aristocracy is more like rags to riches, whereas nobility, you're born into it. You are automatically rich. Cool. All right. Sometimes I really like how you guys explain things. I feel like you guys explain stuff like in terms that like you can understand each other sometimes better than you can understand me. And that's why I really like using the chat with my lectures. I think it's awesome. Okay, let's talk a little bit more, excuse me, about Voltaire. So Voltaire's most famous novel here was Candide. I'm not exactly sure what the French pronunciation of that is called, but I do know that this word here kind of indirectly translates to honesty. And in this book, Voltaire talks about the essential need for the separation of church and state. And Voltaire argues that when religion is used to influence laws, that it inevitably leads to oppression of those who don't follow that religion, or, you know, any of those terms. And so separation of church and state to Voltaire was one of the most necessary components of a successful society. Voltaire also argued that all citizens should have a fair and impartial trial with a jury, meaning that someday when you guys go to jury duty, you'll be asked all kinds of questions. Like if you are in a group that is decided to like move forward and you could possibly be selected for the jury, they'll ask you all kinds of questions to see if you have any kind of potential bias towards whoever the person is on trial. And if you have bias like that, then you will not be selected to serve on the jury. I remember I was on jury duty once, and there was a man on trial for spousal abuse, for hurting his wife. And I remember being questioned to see if I could be an unbiased juror. And the person who sat next to me said that she couldn't be unbiased because she would just automatically think that the guy was guilty because she hated men and because she had all these like, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Preconceived notions about like men who abuse their wives. So she was not selected to be on the jury. Yeah, pretty much, Joseph. If you want to get out of jury duty, then you technically could say something that would get you out of it. But then again, jury duty is one of our civic duties and duty. But anywho, that is one of the hacks. I've never done it, but I've seen it done. Oh no, the guy was totally convicted. He was convicted. He was guilty. Like he was a jerk. I won't even go into detail of what this guy did. I didn't serve on the jury, but it was like all over the news at the time. This was like 10 years ago. But anywho, let's go ahead and move on. So we have Voltaire, we have his novel, Separation of Church and State, and everybody should have the right to a fair and impartial trial. Why did I just maximize that? There we go. Okay, Adam Smith. Oh, you guys are going to like this one. So if any of you are wondering what capitalism is, let's go over, you know what, real fast, let's go over capitalism versus communism. Let's do that. So capitalism, the father of modern capitalism is Adam Smith. He wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations. And in that book, Adam Smith advocated for a free, oh yeah, Nicole, that's actually a really, really easy way of putting it. I actually really like that. Good job. So Adam Smith advocated for a free market economy that was loosely regulated by the government. In other words, laissez-faire. Laissez-faire means hands off. And laissez-faire means that the government takes a hands-off approach to politics. That means that under capitalism, I'm going to put in parentheses here, in theory, the government does not strongly intervene in the day-to-day practices of business. That's not to say that there are no business regulations, though. Have any of you ever heard of something called the minimum wage? I'm sure you have. The minimum wage is a federally imposed law that requires companies to pay their employees a minimum amount of money. There is a federal minimum wage, and then there's a state minimum wage. The federal one has not changed for some time, but the state minimum wage varies depending on which state you go to. I have not made minimum wage in a long time, but I mean, I don't want to get into politics here, but based on the cost of living, the minimum wage is just, it's definitely skewed. But again, with that said, capitalism equals free market. It means limited government intervention. It means that you are able to open a bank account if you want to. It means that you are able to start a business if you want to, as long as you have the money to do it. So capitalism equals free market, whereas communism equals shared wealth. And the problem is that here, actually, let's go over who the father of communism was. The father of communism was Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And then Lenin would later take on those theories and apply them to start the Russian Revolution. So Wei, I'm going to actually give you 2 points of extra credit for mentioning Lenin. That is awesome. Good for you. Oh, Joseph, you read about them in language arts. Did you read about them like in a novel or in an article? You thought I said Carl Weiser. Animal Farm. You read Animal Farm? Holy crap. You guys read that? That is awesome. My favorite quote from that, I'm going to put it in the chat, is that all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And Bolsheviks, anyone? I love that word. I love saying Bolsheviks because, well, it sounds like something else. But anywho, we know that Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels were the founders of communism. In the book, Four Legs Good, Two Legs Bad. Yes. In the Communist Manifesto. And the theory under communism equals elimination of social classes and equal, quote unquote, equal distribution of wealth across citizens. And this honestly, I think in theory, this sounds like an unbelievably beautiful idea. It really does. It really, in its theory alone, it implies that it could create a society that is peaceful, that is void of class conflict, and that is void of poverty. Unfortunately, across history, communism has led to the rise of some of the most brutal dictatorships in all of history. One of the most notable being Joseph Stalin in the Soviet Union. But I don't want to go over too much of what communism is and like all of that stuff. But I did want to kind of talk about it and kind of plant that seed right now so that later on when we talk about it, it'll make complete sense. All right, but before I move on, I want to make sure, are we all clear on Adam Smith and capitalism? Like if you feel good about who Adam Smith was and what capitalism is, then we can move on. Coolness. All right, before we talk about the results of the Enlightenment, I'm going to stay on this slide, but let's talk about ways that the Enlightenment, the Communist Manifesto, I'm going to put it in the chat. The Communist Manifesto was a book written by Marx and Engels, and it is considered the origin of communist theory. So Nicole, if you want to copy and paste that into your notes, you can. But before we talk about the results of the Enlightenment, let's talk about ways the Enlightenment spread. One of the primary ways that the Enlightenment spread was through pamphlets. And these pamphlets would often contain coded language. They were not clear, like they didn't specifically say, revolt against your leader, screw the government, all that kind of stuff. Because if you tried putting that kind of stuff in pamphlets, then it's very possible that you could be put in prison for treason, especially when you consider that as the Enlightenment was occurring, we were still in the age of absolute monarchy. So if you go against your absolute monarch, you speak against him in a pamphlet, you could get killed. So the philosophers that published these pamphlets were taking a huge risk. And for that reason, they would contain coded language. And yeah, these philosophers often had these like language commonalities where they understood what each other was saying, even though it wasn't necessarily direct. Another way Enlightenment ideas spread guys, this is my one well, I have a lot of regret about not being able to teach in person this year, but this is the worst. Another way Enlightenment ideas spread were via Enlightenment salons. Now, this is actually kind of cool because Enlightenment philosophers, they would meet up in bars. They would have beers together. They would eat together and they would talk about their ideas. It was actually super cool. They'd go to saloons, they'd order a drink and then just talk about their ideas. Henry, you said it, I didn't. But they would talk about their ideas in a safe place where they wouldn't really be overheard. And actually, many of these Enlightenment salons would not be in bars. Oftentimes, they actually were in really famous households that would be owned by Enlightenment philosophers. Like Voltaire himself would actually host some of these Enlightenment salons. But the reason why I say that I regret not being in school in person this year is because every year I actually hold an Enlightenment salon in my classroom, but with root beer, not actual alcohol. But I have everybody sign up and they bring food and they bring sodas and everybody gets to act as a different Enlightenment philosopher, and it's so much fun. And I'm so sad that we can't, you know what? I think we could do it. I think we could do it. Are you guys down? Let's organize a Zoom Enlightenment salon. You guys want to do it? Yes, we will do it virtually. I am not going to miss a salon because of COVID. Simra, I don't know how yet, but I'm going to make it happen. But how about all of us? We'll all have like food and we'll all have drinks and we'll all just talk about stuff and it'll be lovely. All right. More of a speakeasy, Donna, because remember, these Enlightenment philosophers were definitely risking their own livelihoods in order to advocate for their ideas. But if you think about it, though, we owe a lot to these guys who were brave enough to spread their ideas in pamphlets and in salons. By the way, we talked about those pamphlets and we talked about how they spread, but how? What invention enabled the spread of these Enlightenment ideas? What invention am I referring to? Nicole, you're super, super close. You're close. I think that was a type. There you go. Good job, Nicole. Nicole, you know your stuff. But yeah, it's the printing press. The printing press enabled Enlightenment ideas to spread, not just in Europe, but all over the world, particularly in North America, where the American Revolution would start. Chloe, good job. Actually, Nicole and Chloe. Let me give you another 2 points. Good job. Yes, Gutenberg. For another 2 points, what year was the printing press invented? By the way, I don't know how I memorized all this stuff. It's just like 15 years of learning it. Let's see. Henry, nope. Donovan, nope. Manor, nope. Way, you're so close. You know what, Way? I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. It's actually Nicole. I'll give it to Way and Nicole. 1450. Good job. So 1450 was the year that the printing press was invented. But with that said, the spread of Enlightenment ideas, I'm going to put this in the chat. The spread of Enlightenment ideas was enabled by pamphlets replicated by the printing press along with Enlightenment salons. Perry the Platypus. Who's that? I need, hold on. Actually, don't tell me who it is, Henry. I'm gonna Google it after our Zoom just so I understand the loveliness of what you talk about. Okay. So let's talk about the results of the Enlightenment. Again, we see a shift towards secularism, towards rational thought. We see increased religious tolerance. We see progress, and we also see rational thought. And most importantly, this is the most important. I'm going to put this. The most important, I'm going to teach you guys a new word. Ramification. That's a fancy word for consequence. The most important ramification of the Age of Enlightenment was the onset of political revolutions in the US, France, Latin America, and Haiti. So that was the most important consequence or ramification of the Enlightenment. I think that's, oh, you know what? We have a couple other things. You know what? Let's save the rest of this. Let's save the rest of this for tomorrow because I want you guys to kind of stew on that. Tomorrow, we'll talk about the American Revolution, and then we'll also talk about enlightened despots. I'll define that for you real quick. Enlightened despots are Enlightenment, or I'm sorry, they were absolute leaders that utilized Enlightenment thought in their rule. All right. I am actually going to end the Zoom. If you guys had questions for me regarding NHD, hit me up on Remind real fast. If you've already asked me the questions and I haven't gotten back to you, I'm really sorry. I just got completely backlogged in all my messages, but I promise I'll answer them right away. But I'm going to end the Zoom. You guys have done great today, and I am super proud of all of you. Thank you all for your
Bye, Miss Melda.
participation. Bye. Bye, guys. You guys are the best.
Love you,
See you
Ethan.
later. After a while, crocodiles. Bye.
Bro, nah, cool, man.